We are honoured to host a rare beast in our studio, a Lions winning captain,
Finlay Calder.
We were on first name terms with the supporters. I'm not saying we put the Lions back on the map, but I certainly think we played a huge part in that.
Yeah.
What kind of captain were you for Scotland, for the Lions?
I was old school.
Fine.
Fire and brimstone.
Fine.
Steam was coming out for the ears, coming out the changing room. Just great toxic atmosphere. I'll remember this till the day I die. We went to select the team for the second test, and all Clive said was, "Finn, if you step down, I step down also."
Wow.
Wow. 2 minutes into a game, you know how it's going to go. 2 minutes into the second test, I knew we were going to win the series.
Into the final moments, Alex Payne trying to keep this side going forward. Haskell takes it on now with just relentless chat, largely about himself. And there's Tyndall to add the finishing touch of glamour and World Cup winning stories. That is how you podcast.
Hello Dream Team, welcome along to this week's episode of The Good, The Bad and The Rugby, proudly sponsored, as always, by our very good friends at Continental Tyres, the official tyre partner of England Rugby. Whether on the field or the road, you can trust Continental Tyres for exceptional safety, performance and grip. And today, wow, we are honoured to host a rare beast in our studio, a Lions winning captain. The 1989 team remains one of only 3 winning tours in the last 50 years. They still hold the record for being the only Lions team to come from 1-0 down to win the series.
The comeback was ignited in the second test by the ferocious Battle of Ballymore. More on that later. Known for being as hard as granite, but famously humble, it's an absolute privilege to welcome the man, the myth, the Lions legend, Finlay Calder OBE. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much for that very gracious welcome from you both. Thank you.
Very nice to have you with us. We'll come on to obviously 89 and what a remarkable rugby story it was in due course. When you look at the game today and you see Friday night, 50,000 red shirts in Dublin, and you see the travelling party that is now the Lions, etc., and you reflect on everything you enjoyed in the game. Yeah, do you wish you'd have a crack at it now, or are you very happy with?
Very happy with
your lot.
I'm very happy, James. You played entirely through the professional era, but we sort of had the best of both worlds.
Yes.
We had the best of both worlds. Whilst we didn't get paid, we were treated very well, and we could enjoy ourselves as well. And a lot of my friends, from my rugby days, it's who I am, you know. And I mean, I was with, my great friend Dean Richards and Brian Moore, and we've made friends, through our rugby.
What did you do post rugby?
No, well, James, I am that old. I worked.
I know.
I worked during, and so it was the amateur days, and Gavin's tour to 93 to New Zealand was the last amateur tour. We were 89, obviously. Yeah. So we came back to work on Monday mornings and got on with our day. I worked for Glencore, the Swiss-based industrial giant, and so I worked in the UK for them. So that was my day job, and they were very gracious to me. They were very kind. They gave me as much time off as was needed. The Lions hadn't toured for 6 years.
Yes.
They were going to go to South Africa, but that was called off at the last minute. Do you remember that, or do you know that?
No, I remember you hadn't played. I know you hadn't played for 6 years. That was
6 years, and that was the reason. 83 had been an uncomfortable tour.
Yeah.
It hadn't gone well. 80, they got beaten in 80. They got beaten in 77. They hadn't won for 15 years, and there was huge doubt whether the Lions would. There was why are we doing this? Almost. My brother Jim was on tour in 83, and he said it fell apart.
Really,
the whole thing fell apart, and he said, they became disjointed, and the selection was poor, and he said you've got to keep everybody on side, and it's quite interesting when people go on tour. They've got to believe they're going to be in the test.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched some of the faces on Friday night of the players that were on the bench, and the game was going against us. It was going against us. Now, you've got 2 choices. You can either push it, or you can go to your shell and go, it wasn't actually down to me.
Yeah, it was nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Exactly. I was just caught up in and you could see for some guys, this was their chance. And it's slipping away from them.
And that, I think, is the secret of the Lions. Where if you can bring them all together to care more about the red shirt and their own
personal
individuality.
State,
yeah,
correct.
It's very interesting what you said there, because I'd never actually considered the history of it. But we obviously celebrate the Lions for everything it is, and the series wins. But actually, when you go back to 83 and you say it fell apart, I think it's probably fair to say that 93 fell apart.
Yeah.
2001, although for the brilliance of the Gabba, it was a lot going on in the camp. There was the Dawson-Healy media.
Correct.
Graham Henry got pulled apart. 2005 certainly fell apart. What was it about 89 that almost sort of managed to rebuild itself? Because obviously the first test didn't go as you want, but what was the essence of 89? Because when you talk about it now, it sort of feels like in many ways, we celebrate 97 for the documentary, but in 89 was when the real sort of, the essence of the Lions was reborn off the back of 83.
We were well aware of our history, and we were well aware that the Lions was under pressure as a body. Now, to see where it is now, to see 40,000 people in the Aviva with the Howden shirt on and looking, it just looked fantastic.
Yeah.
If you had said to me back in 89, we were on first name terms with the supporters. There was maybe 200, and most were parents, by the way. More parents. There was only 200 or something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys were local or they were out there working or whatever. So it was, I'm not saying we put the Lions back on the map, but I certainly think we played a huge part in that.
Yeah.
And it was, why were we successful? We had a good squad. We had a very good squad. And do you remember the name Graham Murray, who captained All Blacks?
Yeah.
He used to have this expression that ripeness is all. Ripeness is all. You've got to be just ripe as a side. Yeah. We were ripe. We were a good side, and we were a good squad. We also had Donal Lenihan, who was a veteran from the 83 tour, and Rob Norster. They were the only two. So they had been on tour. They had seen how things can
They were the
go wrong.
only two from 83?
The only tour from 83 that came through to 89.
Yeah.
And they both knew how difficult things can go if it goes wrong. And Donal was outstanding. So was Bob.
It's interesting as well in regards to the fact that you talk about the Lions being concerned what's going to happen. I know it looks like it's a sort of a stable ship now, but actually we had conversations 8 months ago about whether we were going to tour. Australian rugby is in the toilet. Is it sustainable?
Yeah.
Will the people playing in all the finals and people playing in France? It's amazing for what is one of the best things, or is the best thing about rugby, is continuously talked about. Does it have a place in the modern era? Is it possible to facilitate it? Does the scheduling mean that it's almost kind of becomes worthless at times? It's funny, but it keeps going.
But it's the biggest brand in the world.
Yeah.
That's the fact.
Yeah.
And for the sponsor, I mean, it's a sponsor's dream,
Yeah.
really. This is a huge global brand. And every country, we were talking about it earlier, but, Argentina deserve it.
Yes,
They
agreed.
deserve a series.
Yeah.
So then that goes out to every 16 years.
Yeah.
If you added Argentina, if you added France into it, it's 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So some players will never play against the Lions.
Yeah.
And there's this mythical thing about playing against them.
Yeah.
1989 and all that.
Do you know, in 89, we didn't even have a sponsor.
Did you know?
Did you
There
not?
was not even a sponsor. There you go.
Wow, the times they have changed.
Yeah.
So let's go right back to the beginning. Tell me about receiving the captaincy from Sir McGeechan. And we should actually just say...
No, I didn't receive it from Ian.
Who did you receive it
Clive.
from? Clive Rowlands.
And I'll tell you how it all happened.
How did it come about?
See, Will Carling was runaway favourite, absolute runaway favourite, and he should have been captain. And he was on the money.
Yeah.
He's a super guy.
Yeah.
And but he was injured. And I remember we played. This is absolutely, as I'm sitting here, I'd captained one side in my life. Okay, and it was the Scottish Corn Trade against the English Corn Trade in a charity match in October, because up until then my twin brother Jim had captained every side I'd ever played in. My elder brother John had captained it before, so I never captained anything, and so I got asked to captain Scott. I was the oldest man in the changing room. They'd actually asked the Bear, Ian Milne. He said no.
Yeah.
So
Why did he say no?
Well,
Just not
it's just
interested.
not his thing.
Yeah, okay.
It's just not his thing. I mean, he was a super guy. He only confessed this year. So up until then, I thought I was top dog, but I wasn't. I was second to the Bear. But never mind. So I was asked, and then I captained Scotland against the home. Well, obviously the Five Nations as it was.
Yeah.
And we went quite well. But on the eve of the evening after the Welsh game, we had torn Wales apart at Murrayfield, and Clive came up and he shook my hand and he said, "I'll be seeing you in the summer." And I knew then I thought I was going, but I never thought I was captain, because the captains were of the nations at the time. There was Philip Matthews.
Yep.
He lost out to Mike Teague. The Mike Teague was the bolter, as you talked about.
Iron
we
Mike.
talked about Iron Mike. He was and he became player of the series. He was outstanding, a great fella. So Philip lost out to him. Will couldn't
because he fractured his leg. Because we get him into, he said sort of he wanted to go, but the surgeon had said to him, because he kept playing on it, that if you keep playing, it's going to
just keep going. Exactly. So he was counted out full stop. And then Paul Thorburn, who was captain of Wales, he lost out to Gav and Peter Dodds. So so it landed to myself, and we'd actually had quite a good season. So it was really only by default that I ended up as captain. And
did you say yes immediately?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have done that one.
Yeah.
Well, some people, as you said, the bear did.
The bear did, but I suppose we're different people, you know. But I mean, I just thought this is fantastic.
How long did you go away for when you went to Australia?
Well, that was 7 weeks.
Right, okay.
I think it was 7 weeks, and we had about 3 or 4 days getting together. We had 5 in the management. We had 5 people. We had Clive Rowlands, who was outstanding, just the most decent man I've probably ever known in my life. You know, just a wonderful guy.
We haven't hung out, so maybe we haven't spent enough time together. So maybe the second most decent man. You never know.
Well, so there's Clive. There was Ian McGeechan, who was head coach. There was Roger, who was the forwards coach. A lovely man.
Yeah, I know Roger because he used to. Obviously, he was Wasps back in the day, and then he was obviously Wasps coach, and then he coached at Harrow.
Yes.
So I spent most of my sort of formative years at Wellington College. Playing against Harrow, and he was the man. So I got to know, a great guy,
just a
tough
super
man,
tough guy. There was Dr. Ben Gilfeather, and there was Kevin Murphy.
So Dr. Ben was my Wasps doctor.
Was he?
Yeah, he was a great man as well. Actually,
I'm not sure if he's.
I don't know if he's still around. I don't know. But he was at Wasps doctor for such a long time. And again, when you're in the cycle, when you're playing, all these guys that sort of been around the game, I think because there's a certain level of self-interest as a player and kind of a bit of a selfishness because you're focusing. You sort of meet these guys and you go, this is Ben, and you don't really appreciate the story because I didn't even know he went on was the Lions doctor. That's amazing. And he was such a good guy. And then you kind of find out, all these kind of stories. Laterally, as you progress, what Roger did, what Ben did. Yeah, it's really.
And so from there, you had to do everything.
Yeah.
Duty boys were, and I asked Rory Underwood, who was. He's a gentle man, gentle person. I said, now, the first thing we do is you never share. He was in charge of the room billeting. And so I said, you never share with somebody from your own nation. Yeah. So every time you shared with a Welshman or an Irishman or an Englishman, so that it stopped any cliques forming. Because my brother Jim was on tour in 83 and he said, it fell apart.
Really?
The whole thing fell apart. And he said, it became disjointed and the selection was poor. And, he said, you've got to keep everybody on side. And, it's quite interesting.
Just take me through the first test, first of all, because you got played off the park by your own admission.
Stripped.
And you ended up in a curious position with the captaincy off the back of it. Tell me about the game, first of all, and why it didn't quite click on the day.
Well, we played everybody through Australia. You played New South Wales, you had played Queensland. Queensland was actually a tough match. Queensland hadn't been beat for about 2 seasons on their own turf.
Wow.
And I think it was France had beaten them or something like that. They were formidable opponents in Brisbane. And we beat them. And it was a pretty rough match as well. That was fairly early on. That was pretty rough. And
when you say rough, kind of what we're talking about? Just out and out violence?
Out and out. There was a bit of well,
but what is that gouging? Is that
no? That was
no. Come on, Alex. It's not gouging.
Sorry, where are we starting?
Trauma. No. It'd be just a late tackling off the ball, sticking the knee in, getting off the ground,
clearing out with an elbow, perhaps not a shoulder.
Exactly, and just it was pretty tough, and that was a tough match, and. But we had played everybody, so we had played, and we'd seen them all. Yeah. And what the Australians do, and they were really cute. They landed us in Perth. We played Western Australia. They brought in 12 Kiwis for that one or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They roughed you up a wee bit. Then you're to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Then you're up to Cairns. Then you're down to Sydney. I mean, you're no sooner into a hotel than you're out of it.
Yeah.
In Newcastle, we went to a place, and the day of the match. Guess what? The builder started at 6:30 outside the hotel. Just thanks, guys. And that's, that was Australia. They would do anything to tire you out, to outwit you, and all that. But we'd seen everybody, and we thought, there's nothing here we can't handle. how wrong were we? I mean, they were fantastic. And we just underestimated them right the way through. There was Greg Martin was a good lad at fullback. There was obviously Campo in one wing. There was a chap, Lloyd Walker, played in the centre.
Yeah.
He was a super player. Because I don't know who played him, but everything played off him. You know, they call it their second 5/8, and he was, and they were just up for it. And sometimes the game goes against you, and it was like water going through our hands. We just couldn't stop it. Yeah. I think it was 5-0 or 4 tries to
4 or 5, yeah, I think.
I remember after we got beaten the first test, and I don't know where this came from, James, but I was gutted. Your heart is broken. You thought, anyway, and now. This is how long ago it was. We played at 3:00 in the afternoon. So people at home had to get up at 4:00 in the morning to watch it. Yeah. It was that. So it was in colour. Yeah. Let's be fair.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. And also you took a plane to Australia, not a boat. So
exactly.
that was always not.
So there's lots of pluses. Yeah. But anyway, Nigel Starmer-Smith, bless him, he said to me at the end, he said, what do you say to everybody who got up at 4:00 in the morning to watch this? Which was a fair question. Yeah. I says, get up next week. I said, we're going to sort this out. I don't know where it came from. Yeah. It's just, one of those. Yeah. I says, get up next week.
How'd you get this squad? Because we were talking off camera kind of about the importance of like the midweek team and those kind of stuff. How do you, when you have a loss like that, how do you then keep the guys together as a captain? Do you just, because the fastest way I've ever found to get a team together is you can do all the team building when you want, but just get them on the piss together so they've all got stories and bits and pieces, but it's a busy tour. What did you...
we didn't go on the piss that night, that's for sure. We were pretty hurt.
Right.
We were pretty hurt. And we then, on the Sunday, we flew down to Canberra. And we're sitting in the airport, and I was sitting watching the thing, and it was David Coleman commentating on Coe and Ovid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was a rerun, and it was either Coe had been beaten by Ovid the first, and then it was the second one, and Sebastian Coe came back to win the 1500 or whichever way around it was. And he said, you don't become a bad runner overnight.
No.
And I thought, you're absolutely, you don't become a bad team overnight. And so to fast forward, we went down to Canberra.
Yeah.
And again, they were all over us in the first half, but Donal Lenihan was an outstanding leader. And I think David Sole went on at half-time at wing forward. Do you know how things...
Yeah.
Wow.
He was actually a better wing forward than I was. but he was, he cobbled round.
Yeah.
We were getting beat at half-time, and you're thinking, this is going to fall up. The wheels are coming off the barrow here. And I think we scored about 35 points in the second half without reply.
So you were sitting in the stat. Were you in the change room?
No. The team and the squad were out, but at the end, everybody was down in the changing room, and we clapped them in. Yeah, and it was just the supposed test team clapped in that was that weren't subs, and for people like Robert or Gary. We're on the bench or playing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You didn't have the luxury of a third scrum half, so, but there would be, 7 of us left, or 8, all in our number ones, and we'd go, and it was a huge moment because the tour had turned.
What's the, again, I don't know about Donald's Donuts and that kind of stuff, because obviously 5 of the members of Donald's Donuts would start the second test 4 days later. What was that all about?
Well, that was Roger.
Yeah.
He would say, he called them Donald's Donuts. So, Roger sort of could go off a bit pissed at times. Yeah. Anyway, so they got nicknamed Donald's Donuts,
Basically, so
the
binges,
Yeah, and Donald was fantastic, he was there or thereabouts for a test team, but Paul Ackford was, in possession basically. And so he missed out, but as I say, he'd been in 83, and he knew the importance of keeping the show together and making sure that the lads knew they were in with a chance. Scott Hastings played in the midweek game against, I remember Scotty played in the midweek game against ACT before the second test, and he was a thoroughbred. He always had hamstring trouble, and he said, "No, I think." I think I'll maybe pass and just give it another week. I says, Scotty, you'll be watching the second test from Edinburgh if you don't play on Wednesday. So he says, I'm playing.
Funny that.
So, funny that. But that was, when you were captain. So, well, that's the deal. You can either head off home or you're playing. And he played and he came through it. And I'll remember this till the day I die. Was we went to select the team for the second test. And it's a pretty pivotal moment. You're thinking, okay, so I started the meeting.
Because you get to select the team.
I was one of the captains.
Yeah.
So there's four.
Yeah.
There's Ian, there's Clive, there's me, and there's Roger.
Imagine now, like Marrow picking the team. They talk about kind of self-reliant players and adults. We don't let the players ever do anything like that in the modern era, which is,
who knows better than when you're playing around people what's going on than the captain or the vice captain, or to me, frankly, it's a no-brainer. But never mind. So I remember there were going to be wholesale changes. We had to make changes, and I said, "Listen, from the off," I said, my twin brother was on the tour to New Zealand, and the wheels went off the wagon. I said, because probably down to weak selection, it just But if you think I should step down, then I step down, because the Lions is far bigger than me, and we must win this series. We have to get them. So if you want me to step down, I'll step down. And all Clive said was, Finn, if you step down, I step down also.
Wow.
Wow.
Unity.
Wow.
Yeah.
I even get emotional now thinking about it. I said, that's the end of it. Then you've got the backing, and you say, right then, sleeves rolled up.
But you had to air your bag for you if it's gone.
But you had to air it because why have things gone wrong? Because captains haven't been good enough. They haven't deserved their place. Whether I deserve my place or not doesn't matter. In the eyes of the manager, that was it. And a great rugby man, a great friend of mine, or sadly no longer with us, but that was a powerful moment. And then we made changes, and we brought in. Ian brought in Jerry Guscott. He says, that's the most talented lad. He said he'd played against Romania once. It's like he'd scored 3 tries in his opening test. He said, we blood him, we put him in. And people disagree with me, but for me, Jerry turned 2 test series by himself. His second test, I remember driving into Rug and looking up, and he's kicked the ball, and you think, oh, for God's sake, and then it bounced back into his hands, and he dropped it over. He dropped over for the try that turned the series, South Africa 97. Yeah. He looked up, and that takes some guts to look up and take a drop goal.
I agree.
What a talented man. And so I've always said the most influential man in Lions rugby for me was Jerry. Yeah. Just for those 2.
Yeah, he was a mercurial talent, Jesus.
Wow, was he not?
I think I'm right in quoting you when, did you once call him a precious little devil? And I'm interested in what he was like at 23, the talent he had, the man he was, and I suppose how that relates to someone like Henry Pollock now when these youngsters come through. And again, Pollock on Friday, as the seconds before he comes on, he is living his best life.
Yes.
What do you remember of Jeremy Guscott at 23?
Well,
the talent he had?
I think he was even younger than 23, to be honest. But he was talented, and he also knew it.
Yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves.
So even at 23, in a Lions environment, whenever he was, 20, 21, 22.
He knew he was to the manner born, but he was.
Yeah.
Where most of us have self-doubt.
Yeah.
He didn't have any self-doubt. Another huge change was Rob Andrew. Rob, I think, was out on tour with university or something. He was out in Australia or near Australia anyway. And when Paul Dean had to go home because of injury, then Rob came in, and he was the difference. He just brought that iron will. And between him and Robert Jones, they were a fantastic pairing. So all of a sudden things that materialised that possibly wouldn't have materialised.
And when you go back through Lions folklore, the 99 call of South Africa in 74 is one of the great legends of what's gone before. The Battle of Ballymore in 1989 is up there. How much of that was premeditated? How much of it?
Genuinely, none of it was premeditated.
So there was no...
It was all just frustration.
Right.
And none of it was... wee Jonesy, when he stood on Nick Farr Jones's foot, and it all kicked off. But nobody said, Jonesy can stand at his foot and see what happens. It was none of that. Right. Genuinely, I can put my hand on my heart. But I was not surprised.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? You know how... We had nowhere to go. When we went into the ground, people were shouting, "Here come the Pussycats," and and all that nonsense. And you start saying, "Right, I'd have fought with a shadow. Everybody would. You know how you're in that, you say, right, I don't care.
Was that the kind of captain you were in regards to, because obviously you've got lots of big personalities trying to win them over. Were you like, look, I'm going to speak well, but ultimately I'm going to go out there and lead by example?
Well, I don't know if I spoke well, but I'll do my best.
Fine, yeah.
Yes. And that was, that was my sort of view. I'll do my best. And listen, I'm not being modest or anything. Of the 15 players, I was 15th in terms of talent. Make no mistake, and I'm not being self-modest or self-deprecating. That's the truth. But I put my heart into it, and I think the other 14 knew I put my heart into it. And if I put my heart into it, they would put, and they followed, and they were brilliant guys.
What kind of captain were you for Scotland and for the Lions? What kind of guy were you?
Well, I was old school.
Fine.
Fire and brimstone.
Fine, nice.
We are going to. I'll tell you this lovely story. We we were right up for it. And the second test, we were just, the steam was coming out of our ears, coming out of the changing room. And we're being bayed by the crowd and everything. And, it was just great, toxic atmosphere. And Dean turned to me in the changing room. He says, Finn, this does nothing for me. He says, do you mind if I step outside? I says, absolutely. So he stepped outside. So there was only 14 of us in the changing room.
Well, because he didn't want to hear you speak?
No, it wasn't that. It's just it didn't do anything for him. He just let his
Is it true he sat on a bench and read the paper until you were ready to come up?
That's what John Wells told us. That he said that the warm up in the changing room was Dean would sit there reading the paper, and one of the lads would go for a shit. Someone does the thing, and that was the end of it. He never got faced.
But that was his style, and I said, no, you go. Don't go through the motions if there's no point in But what a player!
When you spoke, was it kind of? Were people sort of headbutting each other and all that kind of stuff?
I honestly can't remember. It was 36 years ago. For goodness sake, so I can't remember. I know it was, but anyway. So let's scroll forward to when we played England in 1990, and I don't know if you remember, but the game kicked off, and very quickly I took the ball in, and I actually hit Mike Teague as first point of contact, and then in came the rest of the pack. And the English pack was driven 20 metres back. It was a perfect ruck, if you can have such a thing. Yeah. And I got up, and Mike's underneath me, goes, "Welcome to Murrayfield." And he said he knew what was coming, and that was the sort of path, because there was in the second test there was 4 Scots. There was David Soule, myself, Gav, and Scott, and so it was all passion. It was quite an even spread of players. Strangely, there was no Irish. Brendan played in the first, but it was dropped for the second. And so it was the first time, I think, ever a test team had taken part without an Irish. How things change.
Yeah. There's a quote. There's a quote actually from your cousin, who was the England team doctor. They don't like you very much, Finn.
English, that was.
Yeah, English. Yeah. What do they mean by that?
Well, he told me this in later life. He said, I was team doctor. Yeah. And he said, he said, some of the things they'd say about you, Finn, he said, they were going to take your head off, And he said, I didn't have the heart to say, you were my cousin.
Hidden secret.
He just said, oh, no. But he said, we used to sledge a bit, and used to really sledge and into people's minds and give them a bit of, terrible stuff. And I remember saying to Andy Robinson, I was playing against Andy, and I said, now Andy, and this is at the back of the line, I said, this ball's coming to me. And I said, but you're not going to get it, because I'm bigger than you and I'm quicker than you. So, and of course it came to me and I handed it, and I got to the next line, I said, see what I mean? And it was that sort of stuff, you were chipping away and, now Andy's a super fella, and all the rest of it, but he must have been thinking,
but when you come up, when you get
mad jocks,
when you get on the tour though, all that
dissipates.
But how did you manage? Did you have to? Were there any one particular head-to-heads that you then had to take into one side? Go, listen, no, you didn't.
Absolutely not.
Everyone dropped it.
Everyone dropped it, and also, what I did was, listen, if let's say Mike Hall, who was from Wales, if he had a problem with me, he was never going to come to me about it.
Right.
So I'm not talking, I'm just saying, I'm taking it for it. Exactly. So I said, we'll have a senior players committee. So there was Brian was on it. There was Bob Norster. Yeah. There was Donal, of course. And myself, and maybe Dean was in it. I can't remember, but because the English had the biggest proportion of players.
Right.
And so if there was anything that
was going on behind the scenes,
speak to somebody who you trust, and then we can deal with it. So that's how we sort of handled.
Do you remember, was there any bits that sort of came?
Not really. After the first test, things could have gone off the wagon, and I know Clive said to JJ, he says, make sure nothing happens tonight.
Yes.
Make sure, because John was a bit of a wild kid as well. You know, he could enjoy himself as much as anyone, but he was given just keep an eye on things. Yeah. So don't let things get out of hand, and things did not get out of hand. But you know,
I'm always interested because I know Brian Moore's a great friend of yours. Obviously, his nickname was the Pitbull, and he was kind of very, very physical player. And sort of later on in life, I've got to know him and interviewed him a number of times.
Fabulous man.
Fabulous man. Like, he's a very interesting character and everything that he has kind of about him. What would he have been like on tour? And because again, I can imagine playing against him. He was an absolute lunatic. But then it's quite hard because when we play against each other, you might have a late tackle or you might have a clear out. And as my career progressed, those bits where you would leave a late elbow or you tread on someone or do whatever kind of went out of the game because there was you couldn't get away with it.
Yeah,
but in your era, that was kind of the whole thing.
Yeah.
How do you then deal with someone like that who was a specialist at that kind of stuff? Did he manage it well? Or?
Well, 2 or 3 things here.
Yeah.
The first is the game today is far cleaner.
Yeah.
And for any parent, I think it's far cleaner game than it ever was now. It was cynical, it was dirty, it was
last man standing.
It was last man standing stuff. There was no cameras, there was no. Not even the touch judges could get involved. So if the ref missed it, that was it.
Yeah.
So the game today is a far better, safer product than it was back then. Getting back to Brian, I was speaking at something last week, and I said, and I didn't obviously know his backstory.
Yeah.
But I've never seen a man train as hard.
Oh, really?
Ever. And what we did, I remember, and he set the tone on the first session after, we'd come together, you see, and we'd had quite a hard session, all this. And I looked across, and there it was. Now, it sounds pretty amateur now, but he used to do his own routine, and it was 20 press-ups, 20 burpees, 19, so 18, 17, all the way down to 1 and back up to 20 without stopping. So it's quite a...
It's rank. It's rank in any era.
Yeah. Okay, so he just, he was obsessed with it. He was almost possessed by it.
Yeah.
Well, after the first session, he was on his own. Second session, there's 5. Third session, everybody's doing it.
Really?
Yes.
Took you with him.
He set the standards.
I love that.
He said, you don't have to join in, but of course, and for someone like Dean having to do it because Derek was breathing down his neck, Derek White.
Yeah.
And if
he didn't do it,
it's
like when coaches offer you a voluntary session, everyone's going to turn up.
Exactly.
And if as soon as one person goes or another person goes in your position, you're always like, oh, for Christ's sake.
And I remember too, I can't remember what game it was, but Robert Jones got awful fool. I mean, just completely away with the drink. I don't think I'll go training today. Says, get out of bed, you little bastard. Come on. And we hauled him out of bed and made him do it in front of everybody. He's puking up and all the rest of it. But you have to do it.
Yeah.
If you let one off, you let them all off.
What were the sessions like? Were they as physical? Were guys sensible? Because, again, we kind of... Well, they were sensible.
There wasn't... You know how you've seen it before where people are... They're trying to, leave their mark.
Yes.
Get in the way.
Yes.
Like at line-outs there.
Yeah.
It just gets a bit... And then scrumming sessions get a bit tousy. And, there's that sort of... After the initial ones, everyone respected each other. There was... I don't think there was one incident...
Oh, really?
Where it spilled over.
Oh, okay, fine.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I wonder sometimes, we... 2017, I remember kind of first couple of games were quite tough, and I think we played midweek games. We obviously had to back it up next day and train. And I can barely walk after 80 minutes, and then obviously having to get in and put tackle suits on and go full bore against the opposition. It's kind of, but then you need to do it for the test team. Yeah.
Martin talked about it last week. Martin Johnson talked about it last week, and he said after the first test when they won in South Africa in '97, remember?
Yeah.
And I think the midweek team were flying up to Bloemfontein, maybe. They were flying away to play. And there was a session to be held the following morning on the Sunday. And Scott Gibbs had said to him, everybody down, full contact. And he said, it was a great call. It was a fantastic... What he says, that was one of the best calls ever made. He said, everybody was there to support the midweek team. but it does need somebody else to say, what about, let's do this, you know?
So nothing premeditated about the Battle of Ballymore.
Genuinely,
but
nothing.
when the switch flicked,
It
went off. What do you remember of Robert Jones on Nick Farr-Jones, and then the windmilling of Dean Richards, Wade Dooley, Mike Teague was right in the middle of it as well.
I wouldn't pick a fight with Mike Teague, or any of them, to be truthful.
Yeah. Brian, I think, was in the four of it as well.
We were just so frustrated.
Yeah.
You know? But I mean, they talked about. I got hold of the referee and got him into that. Well, actually, I was just trying to protect the guy. You know, I genuinely was. I thought this is going to kick off.
Yeah.
So I got hold of him, and by the next time, Rennie was in the ground with me. Of course, and people said, "Well, of course, that's what I did to deflect the referee." I was only trying to protect the guy. Now that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
I do remember Bob Dwyer, the coach. He didn't like. He has remained extremely sour about.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And you know, Nick Farr-Jones, who was captain of the Australian team at the time, he said the second test in Ballymore, which was pretty tousy, he said that was the best thing that ever happened to Australia. He said that's why they won the World Cup. It toughened them up.
Yeah.
And they knew what was coming.
Yeah.
So we did them a favour.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, they were a fabulous team. You know?
And what do you remember of your emotion at the end of that second test?
I've been asked what the greatest moment in my rugby life was, and I say 4:45, the 15th of July 1989. We thrashed Australia in 1918 and won the series. Nothing gets close to that.
Really?
It just went, whew. That was, people say, you must have had a great night. No, all it is relief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, Jim? You've not let anybody down.
No.
You've got there.
But particularly
that was
as well,
for me.
because the fact that Lions hadn't played for 6 years, because the other tours hadn't gone well. I think perhaps if it had been off the back of, you hadn't won a Lions test, or won a Lions series for 15 years. I think all that hadn't been there, because you saw it with New Zealand when they won the 2011 World Cup. It wasn't elation, it was relief.
Yes.
2015 was elation because they'd backed it up and doubled it up.
Yeah.
And it was a very different vibe. I wondered if that had been a different time and a place.
Had there been a different...
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think, when I say about great moments, this almost up there was the Lions had a dinner just for the captains. And it just shows you about the dynamics of things, okay? So this was in Dublin in 2016, and they flew us across, and it was in, I'm not sure which hotel, but it was a grand hotel, and there was only the captains in the room. Nobody else, no sponsors, no committee. I mean, Tom Grace was on the committee, he'd been a former Lion. Andy Irvine, no, they weren't even at the dinner. So at the dinner, there was Ronnie Dawson from 1959.
Wow.
He's passed away. Tommy Kiernan, 68, he's passed away. John Dawes, 71, he passed away. Willie John's still here. Phil Bennett.
Yeah.
There was Billy. There was Kieran. Myself, Gav, Martin. There was Paul O'Connell and Brian O'Driscoll. And we're halfway through the evening, and there was no shape to it. No. There was no shape to the... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was sort of, it was talking about families and stuff like that, And so you've got these 12 men who have all captained the Lions. Talk about imposter syndrome. You feel, really? But anyway, I was there, and I said to Martin, I think you should speak. And he stood up and spoke for 20 minutes. For 20 minutes, he spoke about what it meant to captain the Lions, the history of the Lions, all off the cuff.
Is he like the daddy of the daddies?
Correct.
Yeah.
Really?
Or I would say the king of the jungle.
King of the jungle, yeah.
Even in that
really
rarefied atmosphere, there's one that...
Was it anyone you wanted to...
He was amazing.
Was he the one you wanted to... Had you met him before? Was there somebody you wanted to meet most? Because I imagine that was one of the things about meeting up with the Lions. There were players that I admired, players that I played against, players that I'd watched, players I tried to learn from, players that had this sort of mystique, and you suddenly presented with them. But I imagine as the captains, you hear all these stories, but sometimes your paths don't cross. But I imagine, was he one particular person you wanted to meet?
When you get the invitation for that, I was actually asked to the recent one.
Yeah.
It was in my junk folder.
I cannot believe that.
So I didn't actually get, and then Gav phoned up and said, listen, would you come on down? And I said, listen, I'm organised for the day. As it turned out, I was playing golf with Gregor Townsend. And
You couldn't have possibly rearranged that for another week?
No, I had something else the next day as well, and a trustees meeting and things like that. And I says, listen, I just can't, which was quite ironic because Maro very kindly thanked me for being there, but I wasn't actually there. And then he sent me an email and thanked me for being there. And I said, well, actually, I genuinely wasn't there, but I wish
I'm not sure that was Maro sending you.
No,
I think
I
think that was PA, possibly
one of his
didn't
people.
I
think,
worked that one out.
Yeah, I would have said, yeah. I think that would have been an automatic
I
email.
don't think he would have just, I must send Finlay.
No.
But nonetheless, very polished. But
and what was it like when Martin spoke in that room? Were people kind of enthralled? Because I don't get. I've never been starstruck by anyone just because of the way things are. Apart from the first time I met Martin Johnson, I got introduced by Joe Worsley. He introduced me to Martin. I'd never met him. I'd read his autobiography. I was a huge fan. Didn't really know what to do. I was just, I think maybe 2003. I was just out of school. And I didn't know what to say to him, and I basically just put a load of words together that didn't really come out. And Joe Worsley was like, "Are you all right?" I was like, "Yeah, please can we step away now from him?" But was it quite a similar sort of thing?
Yeah.
One of the greats.
Yeah,
I think Ian McGeechan said that he chose him for captain of the Lions to be that big man.
Yeah.
And
the coin toss, wasn't it?
The coin toss. So, with respect, you don't have a small man, to some enormous bulker. You have a man that looks him in the eye and goes, "I'm coming for you."
Yeah.
And that's exactly,
And he's such a competitor. I mean, I remember in England training session, he was meant to be coach, but he put his waterproofs on, he would run, and he'd be there with a tackle bag, and you'd go to run, and somebody would get absolutely smoked, and you'd be like, "Where the fuck has that come from?" Martin Johnson just bagged him to the floor. I remember they practiced kickoffs. Martin Johnson's running down the wing, jumped over the top of Tom Croft, caught the ball with one hand, and just fucking sprinting. Yeah. Now, he obviously didn't have the speed in him. He looked like that guy. He looked like Richard Keel from Jaws.
Yeah.
That's Happy Gilmore. That's Mr. Gilmore's jacket. This is like high knees, but his knees don't work anymore. So, but he was just an amazing presence.
But to answer your question, when he spoke, I mean, it was just everyone was just.
Now, if you want to catch every single moment of the British and Irish Lions talk, there's only one place to be. You can stream Sky Sports with Now.
That's right. From the very first game in Australia this Saturday all the way through to the final test in Sydney on August the 2nd, Sky Sports is the only place to watch every match of the British and Irish Lions 2025 Tour of Australia in the UK and Ireland. It
is certainly a very big game this weekend. The Tour trying to get back on track. We've got Sir Ian McGeechan in studio as well, which would be very nice to see him, particularly with the news of his all clear. Tell me about... We've obviously had the setback of Dublin. What sort of a reaction do you expect this weekend from Andy Farrell?
I think we'll win with room to spare. We could, of the 37, we could. I know they're not all going out just now, but we will win with room to spare. I don't think we need to get too worked up, and it will get the show on the road.
Yeah, 100%. I thought Owen was brilliant as well in the commentary.
Enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed that. I think for someone who isn't naturally gregarious, I mean, he always speaks brilliantly well, but he just doesn't adore the limelight like I do. So I thought it was fantastic. But it's very easy to stream Sky Sports with Now. You get instant access to all the action, and you can add or remove memberships whenever you want.
Clear your diary then for Saturday morning. Coverage of Western Force versus the British and Irish Lions gets underway at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Head to nowtv.com and stream Sky Sports instantly. Look forward to seeing you there. We've got to have a word on that deciding test that ultimately sealed the deal for you. If the second test was the Battle of Ballymore, how do you reflect now on the build-up to the all-important third test in 1989?
Well, take it back a bit. You'll know as well, James. 2 minutes into a game, you know how it's going to go. Really, you do. You just the first contact, you just know who's up for it. And ultimately, it's 15 against 15, but if everybody wins their own personal battle, then you win. Yeah. When after the 2 minutes into the second test, I knew we were going to win the series.
Really?
Yeah. Just some of the Australian boys we don't fancy this, and that genuine. And I can say it now in hindsight, but I just felt we were in control of the games from there on out. And I think Rob coming in at 10 made a huge difference to us. It just brought a tightness to it. And we were in a good place, and we also had a good side. And so you just knew. And so the third test was just, frankly, an extension. I mean, it was all built up in the media beforehand, but it didn't kick off in the third test. It was just down to a proper game of rugby. And, we were a better side. we were better than they were. And despite what they said, I always felt we were, pound for pound, player for player, we were a better team. And ultimately, it was proven to be the case.
Was there a game of cricket between Test 2 and 3?
When you have these rest days.
Yeah.
We had this game of cricket, and it just shows how 30 competitive men behave. But I'm not sure exactly where it was played. But I said, let's try and get everybody in whites, or as near whites as we can. Okay. And then Rob Andrew picked one side, who's a proper cricketer.
Yeah, he's a good cricketer.
Robert Jones picked the other. And so we had 15 aside, and we were 94 all out or something like that. And so the idea was that everyone got 2 overs. And Stevie Smith was given, the lad from Ballymore, he was given an over, and he got 22 knocked off it, or something like that. It was just, for goodness sake. So anyway, it's now 92 for 12 it was. 92 for 12.
Unorthodox, yeah.
And whoever got left to bowl, Stevie. And that was all that was left. He got a hat-trick. He'd never played cricket in his life.
Really?
And he got a hat-trick. And it was one of those moments that it just brought, it was wonderful because we had beers and we had, and it was just the players. There was no coaches, no management, nothing.
No media, nothing.
And just 30 competitive people having a bit of fun.
What about the game itself? I mean, the iconic moment of that game is Jan Evans' try and sort of getting one over Campo. Do you remember much about the game? Do you just remember the full-time relief as you've touched on?
Rob Andrew took a drop goal and
that's right.
Headed for the corner flag. It was a terrible drop goal. And then obviously Jan followed it up and Campo's tried to run out and the rest is history. But we always knew Campo would try something. That's what we said. Pump him until finally he'll make a mistake. And that was it wasn't much of a tactic, but and we're also dominant. We had plenty of ball. And Robert Jones could land a kick in a sixpence. I mean, he was fantastic. Until finally. And they worked well together. Jan and he worked very well together. And so every time Jan would just chase it up until finally. And so we, But to blame him, as they still do, was wrong. It had nothing to do with him. I mean, yes, they can say they lost the series in the back of it, but I don't think that's fair. The forwards didn't match up. It wasn't down to, it was down to a mistake by David Campese, but that's harsh.
Yeah,
I would say that's looking for a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Did you have a couple of days over there? Did you fly home straight away, or
we flew home?
You had another game, didn't you? Play the Anzacs?
From the moment I came off the pitch, I said, "That's my tour over."
Right.
Yes, I'm not playing anymore. And Andy played in the last test. He was a very good guy, and I said, "Get him. He deserves a shot." So he played for me in the Anzacs match, which wasn't as well supported by the New Zealanders as it should have been.
Okay.
Because it's a hugely emotive thing. The Anzacs, of course, for the fallen soldiers of Australia and New Zealand, and those that served, and they didn't support it well. There was only 3, I think. The chap McDowell came across, Kieran Crowley came across, and I'm not sure one other, but I hope it's much more supported this time. That it becomes an equitable.
Yes.
Kiwi Aussie mix, but we won that one as well, and then came home.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary squad when you look back now. The characters within it, Dooley, Ackford, Richards, Teague,
Brian,
Gavin, and Scott, of course.
Yeah.
Who had the most interesting job of that lot? The policeman, Rory Underwood was in the RAF. I think Jeremy Guscott was a bricklayer at that point as well.
Yeah, it was interesting job. I'm not sure. I remember with Brian. Brian's a clever guy. I mean, he's a lawyer, and he craved acceptance. I said, "Tell you what, you lead the forwards. You call the lineouts. You call it. You know more about this than me." And he just loved it.
Really?
He just loved it.
That's smart leadership.
Coming up to the lineouts, he would call it in and we're off, because he knew what he was doing. We didn't go, what, all this malarkey. I said, you know where it should go. And he just loved that. I just think the world of the guy. And
especially when you know his backstory and what he went through. And I think there's 2 people there's 2 ways in life: is it running towards something, running away from something? I think probably for a long part, it's probably running away from something.
Yes,
and obviously with that transparency,
But he's now. He's a father of 4, all girls. And he said to me once, I had the most amazing coincidence. I was down to see my daughter. Amazing coincidence. And sadly, somebody had jumped on the underground, and so I phoned my daughter and I said, "Now, how do I get to Wimbledon from here?" He said, "I think, what that Brian's up to, you know." And anyway, so I got to Earl's Court. The doors opened on the where I was, and there he was.
That was extraordinary.
What are the chances?
Well, we worked it out because Alex.
I did have one of those the other day.
Alex had, I think it's like 600 million to something, wasn't it?
Incredible.
Some bloke worked it out. Yes, apparently.
And the doors, just we stood and looked at each other, and being very Scottish, it was very awkward. I sort of gave him a hug. You know, we don't really Scots don't do that sort of stuff. We don't do emotion. No. But by crikey, what a joy to see him in his.
Sir McGeechan in 97 spoke of the look. You'll see each other in a street in 30 years' time and there'll always be a look. And you've obviously had that moment. Who are the others from 89 that you still
I had enormous respect for Gareth Chilcott. He was another dirt track. He had no chance of playing. He shouldn't have been on the tour. He pulled his calf. He literally hurtled onto the plane, going out the way farther. But they knew he was a good guy. And just perfect. Talk about holding rucking bags, water bottles. Yeah. He's there, you know, encouraging. And he also had that enthusiasm that you need. He was fantastic. And I'm very fond of Gareth. I think of all the sort of people in the background that don't get much of a mention. Yeah. He's also kind of shop steward for England, wasn't he? You know, that if you didn't like him. And he was, you know what I mean? Yeah. He was a Bristolian.
Rabble-rouser,
Yeah, but by crikey. Good guy. Yeah. Yes. Do you know he had he had a life-changing moment. He required a liver transplant. And he'd come up to London a number of years ago, and the specialist said, "Listen, you know, this is not good. Go home. You're going to have to get your house in order. We'll try and find a match. But the chances are highly doubtful." He's driving home. The phone went in the car. We found a match. Turn round.
Straight in.
Incredible.
That's extraordinary.
So it saved his life.
Yeah.
Great guy. And been very successful in life as well, business-wise, you know.
What is so apparent about the Tour of 89 is just what a great group of men you were. And the friendships have endured across borders in a very intense way. Yeah. You look after each other enormously. Just to sort of bring it all to the here and now, how proud are you to see Jan Evans as chairman of the Lions at Gavin?
You know, it's essential that they hold true to having an iconic lion in there, you know, and to follow him. I think as chairman, you step down after your tour and then somebody else comes in. Gav's on the board, I believe. Gav is on the board, I know that. Gavin Hastings. But, you know, people like Brian O'Driscoll, Sam Warburton, Martin Johnson, you know, there's so many guys. James Haskell, Finlay Calder.
One or two rogues in there as well.
That ship has sailed.
Yes, I think you might know, Well, but, for me,
but I believe that, you know, the tour manager should always have pulled on the jersey, irrespective of what has to give it the.
I would actually make a great tour manager. I mean, I don't derail the whole tour, but
not a rugby tour manager, though. That's it. It's now time for our tailor-made segment, brought to you by our friends at Charles Tyrrwhit, the official formal wear partner of the British and Irish Lions.
Think of it like building the ultimate British and Irish Lions player. Instead of picking a squad, we're stitching together the best of the best.
Exactly that. Each week we'll pick one key attribute: kicking, footwork, engine, strength, leadership, and we'll make a case for each, for which Lions legend gets the nod.
Then we stitch it all together, boot by boot, bicep by bicep. And by the end of the series, we'll have the definitive tailor-made lion.
Fingers crossed. So, Finlay, you're here, obviously. Can you help us pick our ultimate Lions leader? John Dawes, who was obviously an icon of the 1970s, the only series win over the All Blacks in 1971. He was the skipper of that. He was also captain of the Barbars the day they beat the All Blacks in 1973 with the greatest try of all. Willie John McBride, 1974, captain of the Invincibles, also pack leader in 1971, and 17 test matches for the Lions. Architect of the 99 call. Martin Johnson, we've touched on already, winning captain in 97. He was also the first back-to-back captain of the Lions, captaining them to Australia in 2001 as well. Never a backward step taken. And finally, Sam Warburton, who didn't lose the Lions series as captain, Australia 2013, the drawn series with the All Blacks in 2017, and his influence obviously in that final episode of the third test, as we've touched on already, was absolutely enormous. I'm going to actually throw in Finley's name as well, because I think the only captain to come from a test down.
Oh, that's a fair point.
I think we should definitely.
Or the humble bit's got that's classic Scottish. Well,
don't actually do it. So make a case.
Maybe I was amazing.
Yeah. You should absolutely be in there.
Yeah,
It's a very rare treat.
100% should be.
Make a case.
Well, I mean, having listened to what Finlay says, and obviously as a natural born follower, not necessarily a leader, I think about Martin Johnson. You've got to be up there. If the leaders. Well, if you're the sort of the king of the castle and other leaders are looking up to you and you speak in front of them, it's got to be him. I think Sam Warburton was obviously great. I mean, look, Willie John McBride. I've never met Willie John McBride. I don't have anything to infer other than he was an incredible guy with his pipe and his glass, and certainly, those sort of loose earlier tours where, wardrobe doors are getting smashed off. And I remember there's that famous story, the police come to the hotel and they sort of said that we don't want any trouble. And he sort of looks around all the rest of the players and like, I don't think you've got enough numbers for trouble. You know what I mean? So again, I think Willie John McBride or Martin Johnson have got to be the two, but I will give Finlay the kind of casting vote as he has been there, experienced it, sat around with the leaders around the table, something that I might get the opportunity to serve the water at the table, but that's about it.
Go on,
James Martin.
Really?
Without
not
question.
a flicker of doubt.
The rest of us can be water carriers or whatever, but not even close. There's nobody close to him.
How proud are you, though, to be in amongst that crew? There are not many men who've walked this earth who have done what you've done.
As I said earlier, a slight imposter syndrome, but hugely. People used to say they'd follow me anywhere. Unfortunately, it was mostly out of curiosity. But it was just the greatest honour of my life. Really? No question.
I know Maro's thanked you for attending the dinner, and obviously you would have had lots of imaginary conversations, but as he's going to be captain of this tour, any piece of advice you would give to him?
I got a lovely piece of advice from, do you remember Jeff Windsor-Lewis, who was secretary of the Barbas?
Right.
He wrote to me in 1980, a lovely man, I think he was a Welshman, and he said, Finlay, congratulations, your idea, but he said, the key to it is delegate. Don't, people get tired of your voice, no matter who you are, just delegate as much as you can, and that would be my advice to Maro.
It's a very good piece of advice. We'll clip it and send it. I'm sure it's going to be a very, very big few weeks for Maro and everyone he brings on the journey with him. But that is our leaders sorted, and without too much debate as well. The great Martin Johnson goes in. 1 part down, 4 to go in our quest to build the ultimate tailor-made lion.
And as a thank you for sticking with us, the good people at Charles Tyrwhitt are offering GBNR listeners an exclusive 20% off.
Just use the code GBR20 online or in-store. That's GBR20 for 20% off everything from proper shirts to the kind of tailoring that could get you mistaken for Martin Johnson in a boardroom.
Big thanks to Charles Tyrwhitt, and don't forget to cast your vote for next week's picks. Head to our socials now and tell us who's getting the nod.
A final thing that we would love to talk to you about and get your reflections on is the very sad news around one of the Scotland greats, Ian McLaughlin, the mighty mouse, as we were talking about before we started recording today. 5'9" and 15 stone, a brick of a man, arguably the finest lion to wear the number 1 shirt, and there's some very good lions in that category. Started all 8 test matches in the victorious back-to-back tours of 1971 and 1974. 8 lions tests, 7 wins, 1 draw against the 2 toughest rugby nations in the world.
I think you've said it all, haven't you?
But your memories of the man.
I kept in touch with Ian a fair bit, and he lived in Islay, the island of Islay. Yeah. His wife was from there originally, and she had dementia, and so he nursed her for a long period till finally she went into home, and then he lost his son, who dropped down dead just all of a sudden, and I think that was the final. That was a tough one. Yeah. But he was a tough man. By gosh, he was a tough fella. Brother Jim and I, over the years, you pick sides and, test teams and all the rest of it. And we picked our side from 60 to 95 in the sort of Lions era. Who would be your World 15? He was the only Scot that got in it.
Really?
So.
And as tough
physically,
on the pitch as the record dictates?
Just absolutely. Oh, he was a tough guy.
Yeah.
And he was, I think he was from either Kilwinning in Ayrshire, or he was out of a tough school. And tough man. And everybody has to go eventually.
Yeah.
But he was pretty precious.
What a legacy he leaves behind.
What a legacy. Good guy. Yeah.
It's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure to have you on. Fascinating to talk about it was the first tour I ever followed, and it's a real treat to have had you in and to have heard all of the brilliant stories you went through. Everybody that comes on the show gets a little something from us, which is...
the Black Eye Gin.
Wow.
So this
Thank
is
you
our
so
own
much.
gin. It's actually award-winning. Won double gold in San Francisco. It's myself, Mike and Alex's. £1.50 of every bottle sold goes into a players' fund to help men and women across the rugby landscape. It's just become a registered charity, and we're trying to donate money to help players with recovery, research, to make the game safer, whatever it might be. And it also goes unbelievably well with the Mediterranean tonic. So if you are enjoying the Lions on Sky, then please indulge in a drink.
Yeah.
Responsibly, obviously.
Responsibly.
Anything could happen. You're going to finish it by the time you get to lunch.
James, that's so kind. I wish you well with this project.
Thank you.
I wish you all. It's been great.
You're a great man. It's been a real pleasure to have you on. Finlay, thank you. As you can imagine, we would ramble on and on and on if it weren't for our team calling time on us every week. But that's all about to change thanks to our partners at Watches of Bath. Whether you're looking to purchase, part exchange or sell your timepiece, Watches of Bath has you covered.
And it's with thanks to Watches of Bath, every month we will be putting one lucky grassroots player to the test, all in the name of winning a cash prize of up to £5,000, helping to take their club to the next level or have the social of a decade.
The contestant and their glamorous assistant from either Tins or Hask will need to identify up to 6 mystery rugby players based only on the clubs that they have represented in their career. So if you think you have what it takes, please head to the link in the episode description box to fill in the entry form with your club's name and details of your chance to win.
All entries have to be UK based and the money has to be used for the club, not personal use.
Now, a few other little bits to bring you up to speed with. We have got a live show if you're going to be out in Australia following the Lions. It's going to take place at the establishment in Sydney ahead of the third test, and our show is on Thursday, the 31st of July from 6 o'clock. We would love to see you there. We're also, would you believe it, putting pen to paper once again on a new book.
Yes, we are, Alex. The book is GBR Unlocked. It's out the 6th of November, so please do pre-order on Amazon or at Waterstones. Remember, if Amazon discounts the book between now and the publication, you will still get the cheaper price, and it's going to be a laugh a minute, trust me.
And also, we're off on tour again as well with the Lock-In Live. The dates are October the 29th in Warwick, the 30th in Birmingham and the 31st in Cardiff. And in November, it's the 2nd, we're in Oxford. The 3rd, you'll find us in Reading. And on the 5th of November, we are in Guildford. We would love to see you there again. It's going to be an absolute ripper, and tickets are available at myticket.co.uk, and you'll find the link in the episode description box. What a man.
What a man. I loved it. What an interesting character. It's amazing, again, rugby creates such good people that you... I've never met him, and it was like I was in the same team, back row to back row, kind of that look of understanding and kind of what it's like to be a player. I mean, what a great talker, some amazing stories. And the fact it was 36 years ago, he's doing very well. I mean, I can't remember what I did yesterday.
Yeah.
Than listen to that. So he was brilliant. And I think what really came to his admiration for kind of Martin Johnson, and also the fact he's so humble and kind of knew his role, and the fact he welled up when he was talking about kind of standing down was amazing.
Legends live forever, that is for sure. Do leave us a comment, do leave us a review, do turn on your notifications to see and be in touch with all future episodes of The Good, The Bad and The Rugby, and our social media channels are at Good Bad Rugby. We will be following the talk very closely indeed. The email is info@goodbadrugby.com. Don't forget, as we said, to leave us any sort of feedback, questions, etc. and suggestions moving forwards. Thank you as always to our sponsors, Continental Tires, the official tyre partner to England Rugby. Remember, if you're looking for an award-winning tyre that can keep up with your every move, look no further than Continental Tires. We are a folding pocket production. Stats and facts provided by Russ Petty, and this episode was produced by Tom Edwards. One more thing before we go, and extremely excitingly, The Good, The Bad and The Rugby is expanding its portfolio. Here is a clip from our new show, The Good, The Bad and The Beast. Former world's strongest man Eddie Hall is going to be interviewing athletes, adventurers and all-round legends who are not afraid to push the boundaries and break barriers. We will leave you with a clip from the opening episode with the boxer Tommy Fury. Enjoy, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Mr. Tommy Fury. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. You're looking in shape.
Yeah, I feel in shape. Just try to, stay in as much of a good shape that I can, to be honest. When I'm not boxing, I do like my food, as you know.
Yeah, we literally just come from a cafe in Stoke-on-Trent called Captain Cook's.
Yes.
And I ordered a big breakfast. I had a full captain's breakfast with extra sausage, black pudding, cheese, oatcakes on the side. You had extra 6 eggs.
Yep.
An extra 3 hash browns, an extra 2 black
pudding.
pudding.
4 hash browns, 4 black pudding, and 4 sausage.
4 sausage.
Yep.
Plus an oatcake, plus toast.
Fried bread.
Plus fried bread. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm full. I'm
It
stuffed.
was easily a 3,000 calorie breakfast.
And I'm feeling every calorie.
Before we get stuck in, I always ask my guests to bring something I like to call a piece of the beast. So, ladies and gentlemen, a piece of the beast is something I ask the guests to bring, and it's something that's important to them, something that means a lot to them, a turning point in their life. Could be a picture, could be an artifact, anything. Tommy, what have you got for us?
I have got some boxing gloves.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, these are actually the brand that I fought Mr. Paul in.
Okay.
Those are the brand of gloves. And for me, obviously, family is number one. We all know that. Nothing comes before family. But boxing has given me everything. Like everything that I have today is all thanks to boxing. You know, starting off as a young kid going into boxing with Tyson, who he is, it wasn't easy. You know, you get overlooked all the time and kind of like shoved off because, you know, you've already got one fighter in the family. He's the best, that's it. Right? Anybody else can fuck off, basically.
Yeah.
But for me, it was something that I just kept on digging at, and I kept on digging, and kept on digging.
So, essentially, was this the brand of boxing that you used when you were younger? Why this make particularly?
So that is Canelo Alvarez boxing brand.
Okay.
He owns that brand. And Canelo is one of my favourite fighters to watch. You know, I'm sure he's many. You know, he's an unbelievable fighter. And the gloves itself, I tried the gloves for the first time, and I've never looked back.